Welcome to the O Show, your number one podcast for everything training, mindset, and nutrition. I am your host, Oren McCarry, and it is my goal to help you access the best information around to allow you to kick ass in the gym, in the kitchen, and most importantly, in your head. Between my own experiences and those of my amazing guests, I'm confident we will do that. So let's strap in and level up your life starting right now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, guys, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to today's episode of the O Show. We are officially in season 2 now. We have smashed out the 52 episodes in a year, and this is going to be episode 2 of the second series. And we have 2 returning guests from season 1. They both need no introduction because they have had huge success in the ratings charts with their episodes. We have Mr. Dean McKillop, who has done an episode on Neil in the off season, and we have Rich, who has been on twice already doing 2 different topics and will be well known on the podcast. So welcome, boys. I'm excited for this one.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. It's clear that there is already a favorite here.
We'll try to even up the scores on who's done the most appearances soon. I think, Rich, you might be leading now. This is your 3rd one, so you're either leading or you're joint top. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to work out the numbers here, but yeah, it's gonna be a very interesting episode. So, Dean, how has your week been, mate? What's been going on in your world?
Mate, same old. Lots of clients. A couple new clients kicking up for season B. So for IFBB, that is. At the moment, I'm looking at bringing 14 guys into IFBB for season B.
Nice.
And then I'll have another guy and 2 girls, 2 pro girls for the WBFF. So
nice.
It's going to be a big end of the year, plus prepping myself. And then we just released an ebook that Liz wrote for us at Flex, which is called Untangling Fat Loss. And we just literally launched it about 30 minutes before I got on here. So.
Oh, really? Nice. I'll have to go check it out then.
Yeah, there's a whole chapter on potatoes, so it's worth it.
Oh, awesome. So tell me more about this potato book before we get started.
The book is really just there to simplify like the science of fat loss, because so many people overcomplicate it. And then there's also a lot of application. So there's a little bit of theory, and then there's a ton of application in regards to like finding appropriate food swaps and understanding energy density versus micronutrient density and like all these kinds of things. So it's just like highly applicable kind of information. And then, Liz is a big potato fiend. She loves potatoes. So nice. She did a whole chapter dedicated to potatoes and different potato products. And then there's also some comedic potato, which I can't really explain other than for somebody who looks at it, because she had a cartoonist do up some potato drawings and they turned out hilarious as fuck.
Oh, really?
And let me just say that the heading is things you shouldn't do with a potato.
Right. Okay. Nice.
And that's
I'm gonna have to check it out just on that alone.
Luke Lehman said the exact same thing on our post today. He's like, "There's a chapter on potatoes. I'm buying this book."
Yeah, 100%. So, how does somebody buy this potato book, Dean?
The quickest way would be just hit our like Flex Success or Flex_Success on Instagram. It's got our bio links in there. It'll be all in there. It's super easy. Yeah.
I'm going there straight after this to buy that book. Rich, how's your week been, buddy?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a little bit crazy, obviously, with the lockdown and not knowing when the gym's going to open up or anything like that. So, we've been taking the time this week to work on a lot of back end stuff, get the gym cleaned up, and then, basically just go through. We're sort of trying to move to a different system of how we do our programming or how we deliver the programs to clients. So we've been spending a ton of time this week, trying to get all that while we're not doing as many of the personal training sessions. So bit of a crazy week, but it's been good. It's been productive.
Nice, man. And we were talking before about that's what the real great coaches will be doing this week, right? It's not just time to chill out. They're not doing PT sessions. They're maybe not training themselves this week. They're just going to take time probably to build the business and just make it better so they can go back and smash from next week. So fair play to you, man. I'm excited to see how you guys grow with the new systems in place as well.
Yeah, it should be quite exciting.
Awesome. So guys, let's get into it. Let's talk about the special topic. Now, this was meant to be last week, but I had to move it because Evie wasn't well. So apologies for that. But Dean, you might have had some questions on your little box to bring up, but we are doing getting peeled, right?
How to get peeled like a potato.
That's what I'm gonna have to call it now. This is gonna be the potato episode as well.
You're gonna have to send that potato picture over as well to use as the
we'll have to get a cartoonist to do up that. How to get peeled like a potato.
Podcast.
Yeah. So let's talk about Rich. Let's start with you. Like, what does peeled mean to you? What does that definition mean in your mind?
peeled, I would look at peeled as something that we look at only bodybuilders sort of getting to. It's a position where the body fat levels are so low that we start losing sort of energy, productivity. It's a required body fat for bodybuilding, in my opinion. So yeah, it's getting yourself into a position where, you know, you can get onto a bodybuilding stage, which I think is going to be very, very different to some of the other divisions, such as bikini or in ICN, you know, the fitness or sports models, all the way to sort of general population. So it's just a much, much lower level of body fat percentage, which I think is something that should not be done unless it's for bodybuilding.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough. And
it's essentially what we want to get people like as close to as essential body fat remaining only as possible.
Yeah.
Which we're talking internal fat now. Like, so if we can get as little as possible in the external, then that would be, to me, peeled. And I would say objectively, it's typically at least 3 or 4 kilos leaner than what most people think they should be.
Okay, nice. Yep, that's good, because then that puts a number on in people's mind,
And
right?
in some cases more.
Oh, yeah. Well, in some cases, it's still the starter prep for some people. But yeah.
So let's talk about that and like getting that peel that it's literally just internal fat. So we talked about the different divisions. What are the divisions that really require getting peeled versus just getting lean?
I'll let Dean speak on IFBB. Dean does a lot more of the IFBB athletes, so I can speak on ICN. When we look at ICN, we're looking at classic physique, we're looking at figure, we're looking at bodybuilding, and in most cases, we look at men's physique as well. I think sort of the fitness and the sports model divisions, fitness in men's as well, but the fitness in women and sports model divisions and bikini divisions don't require as much conditioning. It's going to be judged a little bit more on shape, but for the divisions, as mentioned before, I think those ones are going to be divisions where, you know, the less body fat you have, the better you're going to basically do in the contest.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's not too dissimilar in the IFBB realistically, except the difference is we have the addition of women's physique and in some instances women's bodybuilding, of which the body fat requirements for them are just as low as everybody else. Men's physique just have to get just as peeled. It's just that they're not really showing some of their physique, so they can probably, depending on like what their natural predisposition is to where they lose their body fat, some of them could not be like total body peeled, so they may not have like fully peeled glutes, hamstrings and all the rest of it because they don't have to show them, but they may be lucky in that they get lean through the trunk faster than they get lean through the legs. So it's a little bit potentially a little bit less lean for men's physique, but I would say like if you're looking at like top end quality, most of those guys are essentially just bodybuilders in shorts. And then the otherwise the same: men's bodybuilding, men's physique, women's figure have to get peeled in IFBB.
So you would say women's figure would be, because I think on the criteria on the sheet I've seen, they said like 10% leaner for women's physique than women's figure. But sort of watching a lot of the shows, I mean, the figure girls are, you know, like you said, are absolutely peeled to the bone. So
yeah, like they've still got separation from glutes through hamstrings, and like their quads are all separated. They're just maybe not quite as grainy in some instances, but I think that's more of a genetic proclivity than it is an actual body fat issue. You know, it's like, does your shape and again predisposition to your look suit figure as opposed to the actual body fat as a percentage? Not that we reference that because it's an impossibility to give a true percentage to body fat. Like we all know that calculators for those are so incorrect that it's just not worth commenting on. But yeah, women's figure have to get particularly lean, especially in IFBB.
Yeah. And then what about in IFBB with the new wellness, Dean? Like I know it's still new, but how peeled do these girls have to get versus the likes of bikini or figure, or are they somewhere in between? What's your thoughts on that?
I think they're trying to find their way currently globally because there's definitely different representations of what we classify as wellness through different countries currently. Like there's no like, I suppose, uniformed acceptance of what lower body fat they should be versus what their torso should be and so on. But it's like we had Jacinta, I always stuff her name out. I think Jacinta. She turned pro for us first in Australia. She was pretty peeled. Yeah. And then the girl from Melbourne who won just recently, less peeled. Some of the top girls, typically speaking, though, what it's supposed to be is slightly less conditioned through the lower trunk and fuller with a larger muscle imbalance, I suppose you could say, towards the lower trunk. and then as lean as figure, but not as big as figure up top, but more so halfway between figure and bikini. So it's really a genetic lottery, wellness.
Yeah, wasn't wellness sort of developed as well for the Brazilian girls that just naturally held more body fat on their lower body and trunk? Yeah,
or preferentially had butt implants, whichever one it is. You know?
So that's how we go about winning wellness, right? Like just get the butt implants in and.
No, I'm being a smartass, obviously, but yeah, it's definitely a lot more mass towards the lower leg and through the glutes, like quad heavy, glute heavy, and then an upper body somewhere between figure and bikini.
Yeah, okay. And Rich, I'm going to hit you with the same sort of question because you mentioned the difference. Bikini and sports model don't need to get as lean, but if anyone's listening who's looking towards them categories, what's the difference between the two in terms of how peeled they need to get relative to what you talk about as being truly peeled?
Well, I think one of the things that you want to consider as well is the more muscle mass you have, generally, the leaner you're going to look. So I think sports model is quite a bit more muscular than bikini. So I think even if they are relatively around the same body fats, the sports models will tend to look a little bit leaner. In terms of that, I think, with the bikini girls and the muscularity that they like, I think if you get too lean, they sort of start looking a little bit skeletal. So you do have to keep a little bit more body fat on just to, make sure that you can have the right shape. Whereas with sports model, they're going to be a little bit more muscular. So they're going to look, it's not, you don't want that dry, grainy lean, but you still want them to be conditioned. Like bikini they'll mark you down for having any form of abs. They'll sort of like the outside area of the abs only. Whereas in sports model, it's good to have like a solid midsection. But I think sports model is definitely going to be a lot more muscular. So I think they will just tend to look a little bit leaner than the bikini girls just simply for that reason. But again, I think, the big difference is going to be more muscle, more shape, and then condition wise, I think a little bit leaner, but at the same time, that muscularity is going to actually make the girls look a little bit leaner than they are in bikini.
Yeah, nice.
Like this seems like this doesn't necessarily seem like a parallel conversation to getting lean or as lean as possible. But the reality is that all of this conversation around what determines your likelihood of success in a given category will be one, your genetics, like how you look, where you put muscle, where you hold body fat. And then if you're aware of like what is necessary to be successful in each division and you aren't genetically predisposed to suit that, let's just, for example, say you get very lean through the midsection as a bikini competitor first, but your lower limb holds too much body fat. The reason why it's important to recognize these things and then understand what category you're going to and like what the preferences are is because some individuals may actually have to get leaner first than what is required in order to then put food back in to limit their like sort of like their unluckiness with their genetics. So like someone who gets lean very early in the midsection, they have to get lean beyond what they need to get so that they can kind of put some body fat back on so that the lower limb matches the standard. And they almost try and like regress their physique coming into a show. Whereas a lot of people just go, I'm going to do a show. What do I need to do? I lose fat, and they lose fat all the way in. And they have no consideration whatsoever is like, what do I actually have to do to fit the category that I'm competing in? So this conversation is actually super important.
Yeah. Okay.
I think a really good example of that is from Perth, the IFBB bikini pro, Barbie Heng. Barbie's midsection she can be peak off season and she's got really, really developed abs where she has to get her legs conditioned enough to get on a pro stage for bikini. Generally, her abs start popping out quite a lot just because she loses a lot of body fat there. So, a really, really good example of what Dean's just saying there. And she's just genetically she puts all of her body fat onto her lower body. Her midsection is very developed and it stays very, very lean all year round. So, that's a genetical thing that is probably going to work against her in bikini, but it's something that you have to sort of understand and come into a contest appropriately for.
Oh,
yeah. Okay, perfect. And Dean, have you prepped many girls for WBFF just to give people a comparison of what's needed there?
Yeah, I've had one girl do bikini, and then I have another girl who's turned pro recently, Ella. She does fitness, I believe. She may do figure this year as well, just to sort of check that out. WBFF is tough. They are very open about the fact that it's fashion and fitness. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, they don't necessarily have a very defined criteria as to like what the ideal man or woman looks like. Mm. So, like you've got the muscle model guys who are essentially bodybuilders, but maybe presented a little bit differently. So they don't look so bodybuilder-esque. Then you got the fitness model guys, which are like just a really small version of a bodybuilder. No offense. But like you may have somebody that could be a difference of 15 kilos in those categories still winning or losing. But the guys have to definitely get peeled, no question. And the guys in WBFF all come in great shape. Collectively, probably better than a lot of other federations, to be perfectly honest. Then in the girls, you've got girls that have like come in absolutely peeled, like Emily King came in peeled, Ashley Coulthard. Like all of these girls have all come in peeled at one point or another. Hattie Boydle's the same. But they're kind of being told, from what I understand, to soften that look up a little bit. So the difficulty thing with WBFF is like you kind of have to come in how you want to and hope that it suits what they're looking for.
Okay.
Which for me is a nightmare as a coach, because my preference is just get lean. Like, take away one of the variables that you're being judged on, which is condition, and then you've got symmetry and muscularity and presence and all the rest of it. If you can at least nail the condition part, then the rest of it is kind of genetics and training over a long period of time. But for the time course of the prep, really all you have up your sleeve in the time course of a prep to fix or to enhance is the body fat. So I'm always a get as lean as possible first kind of guy. And then if someone tells you that you'd lost because you're peeled, like, is it really that offensive?
No, that's true.
So like my bikini girl lost in WBFF a couple of years ago because she was probably just a touch too lean. But we had the discussion. It was like, would you rather be too lean or would you rather be not quite enough and be told that you didn't make it because of that? She's like, I'd rather be too lean.
Yeah. And
then this year she came in a little bit fuller. She prepped herself with her partner, Brad, and we just did some consults, and she actually took the pro card this year. So
nice.
You kind of got to pay your dues and find your groove in the WBFF, I found.
Yeah, fair enough. And let's get into the actual, the nuts and bolts of what it takes to get peeled in. Now that people kind of know what each different division is, where you need to get extremely peeled versus maybe not. So, Rich, why don't you kick us off with, let's take one misconception about what it takes to get peeled. Let's start there.
I think one of the things that, regardless of how high you get your calorie intake, it's going to be hard. I don't think it's never an easy process, and anybody that goes into it, I think a really good point from this was on Dean and Brandon's podcast the other day, where they were chatting about the calorie intakes, and at the end of the day, regardless of how high your calorie intake is going to go up, it's going to end up, getting into that what we consider peeled condition is going to require low calories. It's going to be hard. It's going to be, very, very hard on the body. And I think, there's a lot of people that come into it thinking, because their calories are so high or because they're naturally lean or whatnot, that, it's not going to be, you're not going to go into that position of suffering, which I think is a huge misconception, because anybody that's ever been properly peeled is going to tell you that it hurts.
Oh. in more ways than one. If I've got, like, mine would be is that I think a lot of people have a false expectation that fat loss to get as lean as possible will happen linearly and fairly consistently and without error. And they don't allow for one, human error, in that they make mistakes or the coach makes mistakes. They don't allow for like environmental error, in that like dates may change or they may have to travel more or the work gets in the way. And then they might even not account for physiological error, where we have some negative adaptation to the point where we haven't accounted for that, and fat loss stalls. So because people think that fat loss is going to be this linear progression whereby you're like, I need to lose 15 kilos, I only need 15 weeks, they don't factor in error margin. And it's the error margin that's not factored into a prep that doesn't allow people the opportunity to truly get peeled, because they never have the opportunity to really take a break and think about, like, is the trajectory that we set currently going to facilitate the result we wanted to? And everybody ends up 3 or 4 weeks behind because they didn't give themselves the 3 or 4 weeks of error margin. So that would be my biggest thing that I think people fuck up, is they try and shorten their preps too much in fear of dieting for too long.
Yeah. And is there anything that you would recommend in terms of, is it just where they need to diet for longer, or is there anything that you could build in during that to manage that error margin if things do slow down or they're not quite on track?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I try and be relatively objective about when I start fat loss for individuals. So I'm going to take some, so now it's becoming far more subjective, in that I've done this long enough that I can visually look at someone and go, there's about this much to come off, But in the past, I may have, say, got something that's a little bit more objective, like a DEXA to tell me total fat mass. And then I might have an expectation of total fat mass come the end of prep. And in doing so, I can work out the difference of, like, how much fat do they have now? How much fat should they have when they're in prep? How long does it take me to remove that fat? let's just say we could get away with an average of 500 grams per week, just to pick an arbitrary number. Well, if they've got 10 kilos of fat to lose, we now know that there's at least 20 weeks of dieting to do that safely. And then we have to factor in some error margin. So we might say, let's have 2 weeks of error margin. So now it's a 22-week diet. And then we might be like, well, we don't want to diet every day of the week throughout this entire 20 weeks or 22 weeks. We want to have periods within that dieting phase where we don't diet. We have a little bit more food. We take a physiological and a psychological break. And then we're like, that now is going to step me out another 2 to 3 weeks. And before you know it, the previously thought out 16-week prep that everyone does has now become a 24-week, 26-week prep. So really, it's just putting in the most appropriate plan, knowing you've got more time up your sleeve, and you can always stop dieting. That's the thing that people forget too. You don't have to diet consistently every week throughout the entire prep. It's perfectly reasonable, and I would say arguably probably beneficial in a contest prep at least, maybe not for general pop dieting. That's a whole nother kettle of fish. To have breaks, have intermittent breaks throughout your dieting period so that you can reset yourself psychologically to go again and go again and go again.
Rich, would you agree with that, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah.
Say no, I dare.
It's funny because Dean does all of his work online, where as opposed to with mine, a lot of it's done in person. So, Dean looking at how much fat mass there is, and then, working out a plan, backtracking from that is actually identical to what I do, but I use mine with skid folds a lot of the time. So I might say, I've got from 10 years of prepping people, I've got sort of baseline numbers where I feel on skin fold calipers, like how many total mils somebody should be on stage for each division and whatnot. So, for me, for over 7 sites, we look at about 20 mils, over 9 sites between 27 and 30. And then what we actually do is we'll take their skin fold mils, say they're at 60 or wherever they need to be. And then, I have a sort of a general guideline of maybe they'll lose 2 mils per week. So instead of using the kilos, as Dean was saying, we'll use mils, and I usually allow for 3 weeks so I try to have them sort of stage ready by 3 weeks out, just for margin of error. And then, we allocate diet breaks in there. So we use the sort of 2 mils, 1.5 mils per week, leave 3 weeks for error, and then put diet breaks in for however long we need. And then that's generally how I would actually work out the majority of my contest prep. So it's actually quite a similar process. Just, obviously you can't do skin folds online. So yes, we use that exact same method actually. So
yeah. As many times as I've tried to find a practitioner around every major city in Australia to do them on behalf of me, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because I used to do similar, like really the take home message here is that we're going to work out what the end goal is. We're going to look at the current physique and we're going to work out the difference between the two. And then we track backwards. We actually try and make something that's relatively subjective as objective as possible, so that we take a lot of the confusion and a lot of emotion out of our decisions. And it also, I think, sets the athlete up with the right mindset too. Like, oh, holy shit, okay, I've got to lose that amount. One for me, I always do is if I think someone's got to lose 12 kilos, I tell them they've got to lose 15. It's like, you need to lose at least 15 kilos. And they're like, bullshit. I'm like, we'll see. 9 times out of 10, they end up there. Because some weird shit happens when you get peeled, but just be a little bit more objective.
Yeah, cool. And just to clear up as well, because we're talking about skin folds, we're not talking about a set percentage, because the percentage is very skewed. We're talking about the mils over the 7, 10, 14, however many sites then, right?
Yeah, I always prefer to use mils over actual body fat percentage, because I think the body fat percentage obviously can in a perfect world, you could get somebody in at the exact same time and everything would be, life happens. And I think, there's a lot of things that can actually fluctuate a body fat percentage other than just body fat. So I find it most accurate just to use mils. All my data from the past few years of, is relatively accurate within, 3 or 4 mils getting somebody on stage. So I've always found that, again, that's been the most objective way that I can sort of, get people where they need to be without too many fluctuations or outside sort of interference or things like that can manipulate the numbers.
Yeah, perfect. And then let's talk about the actual struggle of getting lean, because I'm not sure who said, I think it might have been Rich, you were talking about how regardless of where you start your calories, regardless of where you end up, it's going to get hard. How much of that is down to the calories you're on versus that level of body fat, because you often hear where people will say that it's the leanest they've ever got, and once they get to that stage where it's just about past the leanest they've ever been, that's when the struggle like really kicks in, because their body's just not used to being at that percentage, right?
Yeah, look, I think it's probably going to be a mix of both. I also think this question probably should be directed at Dean, because while I do contest preparation, I've actually still haven't competed myself. So while I have been down to low levels of body fat numerous times, I think peeled is probably not going to be the best one for me to answer, as that's probably where Dean's going to be at. I think personally, though, looking at clients, I think if you're clever with the diet, and I think you start using volume foods, and you're not if you're on for example, if you're down to 1,800 calories and you're trying to push Gatorade into your workouts and things like that are just sort of taking away your carbohydrates and not a lot of food volume, I think there's ways to make it easier, but I think at the end of the day, it is always going to be hard, but you can find ways to try to make it a little bit easier. And I think there's probably a big portion of, how hard it's going to be food wise. But in terms of actual how you're feeling, I'm going to shoot that question over to Dean, because I don't really have a desire to get that peeled.
I would not encourage it. I think personally, I would say it's primarily going to come down to the body fat.
Yeah.
Because that's the most physical strain that you'll ever experience. Because even in the presence of a short period of more food, you'll still feel the same. Physically, you'll still have the very low energy. You'll still have a very low libido. You'll still be feeling like you're walking on razor blades and sitting on razor blades too. There's a certain point in time in a prep where the body fat is just so low that your body does not want to function, and it just wants to get fatter, and it wants to sleep, and it doesn't want to do exercise. And bodybuilding is a really, really, really funny venture to go on, because we're the only people where we expect the athlete to train as good as they've ever trained with the least amount of food they've ever eaten in the most unrecoverable state they've ever been in.
Yeah.
It's absolutely outrageous when you think about what you actually have to do. So I would say it's body fat. And I think if you draw a parallel between natural competitors and non-natural competitors, that would probably further solidify my opinion on that, in that natural competitors, where the only difference between a natural competitor and a non-natural competitor when it comes to the energy and the availability coming to the end of contest prep is probably that an enhanced individual can still perform sexually if they want to, but they still don't want to, So there's no drive. The energy is still gone. It's just that, and this is somebody who's using exogenous hormones to offset the negative removal of those, or downregulation is probably a more appropriate term. But so we can take the two individuals, one has hormones, one doesn't. They both still feel like shit. The only difference is the one with the hormones can still perform should they need to, but they don't want to, trust me. And if they do, they're not peeled.
So let's talk about that as well, because that's something people will not think about. People think about, I'm going to get peeled, to think about how good they're going to look, but they don't think about, lack of sex drive, lack of energy. Like, how big of a factor do you feel that is from working with males yourselves, or personal experience in Dean's case where you've been peeled? How hard is it to like get that drive, and like, does that affect relationships a lot? Because I can imagine that a lot of people will be shagging like rabbits in the off season, and then it comes down to it, and it's not that they can't do it, but they just their energy is going towards the prep, and they don't want to expend more energy, right?
Yeah, there's almost like a double burden, at least speaking from experience, whereby if you become hyper focused on the goal, anytime that you become really hyper focused on any kind of goal, a lot of the external distractions typically go away. So like even now, like if I'm fully fed and fully hormone loaded, but I have a particular task that I want to achieve in the next 2 months, and I'm like ham on that, I'm hyper focused, the blinkers are on, then that kind of like fun stuff gets pushed to the side because you kind of forget about it. Yeah. And that just becomes tenfold in the contest prep, like the focus is I need to do X, and then you double down on that, and that you've got the physiological consideration, and that anytime that you're moving in towards essential body fat, it's just counterproductive to you as an individual to then try and find somebody to mate with. You don't have the available energy to do that. The expectation is that you're probably going to die in a few months if you continue down this route, and it's probably not the best idea to seek somebody to then have children with. So it's a double problem, hyper focus plus a lack of hormones.
Yeah.
or energy. Energy availability is the appropriate term to use. It's not even a lack of hormones, because like I said, in an enhanced individual, you can still perform, provided you're not taking drugs like an idiot. You can still perform. You just don't have the desire to seek it.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And Rich, I know you work more with females in the prep sort of world, like for bikini and stuff. Have you ever got feedback like that from a female who's open to talking about it, like how her sex drive just goes?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I actually find in terms of sort of relationships, it's the Gen Pop clients tend to have more issues with that rather than the contest clients. Like from what I found is a lot of the, being so goal driven on the contest prep, generally partners and things like that are extremely supportive. And I have very rarely have issues in that regard. I think I tend to have more issues when I'm looking at the general population clients, where it could be, two people have built a relationship on going out to eat, and then one person sort of changed their philosophy and, they want to start getting healthier and they want to start tracking their food, and that can tend to cause issues in relationships. So it's kind of the opposite, actually. The general population clients, I see that happen a heck of a lot more than I do in the actual contest preparation clients.
Yeah, I think contest prep clients have the expectation that there's a level of restraint and restriction now that is going to be short-lived, it's acute, and it's for a very specific reason, Whereas most people who want to lose weight and change nothing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Or change very little.
Yeah. And one thing that I guess is kind of divided, right? We know artificial sweeteners are pretty safe, right? The amount that's needed to actually cause any negative effect, we just could never consume. But you find that when people get towards the end of prep, they're hammering Diet Cokes. They're putting, like, personally, I would put flavor drops in my coffee, so I couldn't even taste the fucking coffee anymore. I just crave that sweet thing. Is there any negatives from this point of view where it can affect the physique? Because you get some coaches who say, yes, they're safe, but they affect the physique. Some people say they're safe and they don't affect the physique. What's your thoughts on that, guys?
You want to go first or me?
Sure. Go for it.
I was going to say, I'm very, very straightforward on this. I think, I have some clients that have said to me that it sort of makes them feel gassy, makes them feel bloated or whatnot. And then, logical answer, we'll just remove it. We're close to prep, but they're close to a contest. It's not going to be, something that we're going to do forever. So, whereas I have other clients that have absolutely no issues with it, and they'll sort of, leading into shows have, if it's going to help their adherence, something like a zero sugar Coke or something like that. I have no issues with it if it's not affecting them.
Yeah, I think it would be evidence. In an evidence-based approach, it would be unfactual for a coach to say that they definitely cause X, knowing that they don't, at least from the body of the evidence. But I think it would be ignorant and disingenuous of us to say that some people may not anecdote-wise find that X causes problems. And if that is the case, then the removal is the easiest. The biggest thing I focus on, though, is the reason behind the why. Why are you removing it? It's not because we think it does X, Y, and Z. It's because it's just currently causing you some form of gastric distress. In this point in time, at this very specific time, this is a problem. We'll remove it for that reason only. So I just don't like to associate the whole it's definitely not fucking spiking insulin, put it that way. It's not having any of that. It's not, the amount they're having isn't potentially messing with the gut microbiota. It's likely the chicken and broccoli diet you've got them on. there's a whole other bunch of cofactors that people mess up in a prep that causes them the problems more so than those. The biggest problem I have with those things, and let's go for fake foods sort of thing, any food that typically has a calorie that now has these really low calorie options that are just loaded with sugar alcohols, is more the psychological drive behind the person to seek those things out constantly. It's almost like those individuals typically fear hunger the most, and those that fear hunger find getting hungry the most difficult. I don't know. Do you find that, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think I've always looked at it in terms of just the adherence sort of point of view. So I guess that actually pretty much answers that question perfectly. Yes, it is. Because I have I find I'll have clients that, I will stress that they will binge on their diet if they don't have something like that to look forward to towards the end of the day. So, going off that, then yes, actually I would have to 100% agree with that.
Yeah, say It's like people have behaviors like, oh, I eat a packet of sugar-free gum a day. You know, like, do you really need to eat 14 pieces? You know, like the answer is no. You know, like I craved a bit of sweetness, so I had this. Like, or they're having like 1.5 liters of Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure 500 ml was sufficient. You know, absolutely. So it's the individuals that are trying to run away from the stress of dieting that I find make dieting way harder. The more that you can just sort of be one, I've used this term before and I sound like a dick saying it, but be one with hunger, you know, like it'll be like, this is what happens in prep. Then the constant seeking of that dopamine release, like I need something sweet, I need that hit, I need to feel full all the time. Like it just makes it so much harder. Like you're just far better off just acknowledging that shit's reality and just deal with it.
I think that, you know, comes back to it a little bit as well at the same time. So, you know, you just have to be prepared that no matter how high your calories are, the dieting to get to that level of body fat it's going to be hard. And it's one of those things that if you can accept it from, you know, day dot that you're going to have to go through this, you know, it'll make the dieting process a whole lot easier.
Yeah. And that's one other misconception here too, is that a lot of people think like because they see X person eat X calories, that one post on Instagram tells you the entire sort of, schema of their prep, when really it's probably just a little blinker of their prep where they had a high day, like every 10 days or 14 days, but they only tell you they had the high day, you know? And that the realization is that people need to start to recognize is that everybody has a different level of adaptability in both directions. You know, some people require a shit ton of food to grow and they don't seem to get fat. Highly adaptive to the positive. And then that same individual, the same individual or somebody else may then be like highly adaptive to the negative. So like I'm like, I struggle to get fat on a lot of food for whatever reason, but I also don't have to cut my food down super low to get lean. But then in reverse, like there's a guy named Austin Stout in America. This dude punches like 7,500 calories in the off season. And he's like the same weight as me, 115 kilos. And in prep to get to his weight, which I think he gets in at around mid 90s, he goes sub 1,800 calories. And like, I've never gone lower than 2,300 for 4 days of the week in my life. Like, so we have to understand that we are genetically unique. And because we are genetically unique, we're going to have varying levels of adaptability. We want to try and control for some of that adaptability, like controlling output and minimizing like a reduction in need and all of these sorts of things. But just know that not everyone's the same. So like I put up a post the other week, I don't care what your calories are. And I don't, because I have some clients that get to eat way more than other clients, unfortunately, and some get to eat less. But if they want to get to a particular destination, that destination requires a certain level of restriction that is specific to them. So just be prepared to know that there may be a point in time that this is just going to get hard.
Yeah.
And that's unavoidable.
And like, I think I probably learned that as a coach a lot with my brother. You know, we had him, I think one of, not the show he had just done, but the one before that, he had started on about 3,400 calories. He's about 80 something kilos in the off season, and he ended up dieting down. And, you know, we had to take him to about 1,900 by the end. And then we sort of pushed the calories up over the next 18 months and got him to around 4,500. And then he ended up in, you know, 50 calories more or something like that, you know, coming in, which I probably would have put down to a little bit more lean body mass. Would have been probably the only thing that I would have suggested would have actually changed that. So yeah, again, you know, some people do have to go quite low. Some people are lucky enough to diet down on, you know, high amounts of food. I know my ICN bikini girl right now, that's 54 kilos or whatever she is right now, you know, she hasn't dropped. I think like she went down to maybe 2,100 for a little bit, but the majority of her prep, you know, up until 2 or 3 weeks out was at 2,500 calories. So.
And I bet you she feels, or at least feels like the perception of how she feels will be the same as the girl that's eating 1,500 at a similar body weight, body fat, provided they've lost a relatively similar amount of percentage. And this goes back to that question before, and it's like, it's less about the calories. Psychologically, it's nice to have more calories because you can put more volume in your mouth, right? But the physiological demand of being leaner and having lower energy availability is what truly drives the adaptations that make you feel fatigued, that make you seek food, that make you want to lay on the couch, you know? Yeah. It's the body fat.
Yeah. Okay, let's go a bit deeper in, because I know we talked about Rich being more versed in ICN versus IFBB for Dean. Rich, let's talk about sort of the stages for, say, like the last, maybe 4, 6, 8 weeks, where somebody goes from relatively lean to peeled in one of these natty divisions, whether it's physique, bodybuilding, classic physique, whichever ones you named there at the start, what's the difference? What do they need to do to go from that point to getting peeled in your experience? And I know it's still quite general after what we said about it's all very personal, but if you had to generalize it, what would you say?
I think it's more of the same. I think it's, a lot, it's not really anything that you have to do differently. I think obviously you're going to have to dig a little deeper. Calories are going to have to be a little bit more restricted, and output potentially has to be a little bit higher. I think a lot of it will actually come down to how well you manage the start of the prep. I think, if you're starting in a position that's too high, or sorry, too low, like your calorie intake's too low, or your output is too high, getting to that bottom position is going to take a heck of a lot more work. But again, I think it's the same amount of work. It's the same type of work. It's just going to be, more of it.
Yeah, that is the best but most exciting answer for everybody. But it's the reality, man. That's the reality. Yeah. Is you just need to keep repeating what you've been doing for the last 16 weeks.
Yeah,
and let that process happen.
One thing that I do actually like to do, and this is something that I sort of pulled off of Dean a little bit, was, looking at the start of the prep and maybe looking at a little bit more of the, like front loading some of the cardio work while they have more energy. And then, maybe looking at something a little bit more intense cardio wise at the start of the prep while they have more energy. And then as the prep starts getting pushed into the deep end, start, doing output that's not quite as taxing on the body, and it's easier to recover from, like just using just steps opposed to sort of like using if somebody wanted to get their output from assault bike sprints or something like that, and then front loading that at the start of the prep and then starting to use the less recoverable stuff at the back end of the prep. That would probably be the only slight change I would make, but again, otherwise it's just more of the same.
Yeah, that concept is like it's like a reverse engineered idea of what I think a lot of people go through in prep.
Yeah.
Because if you think about like what a prep is from start to finish, is at the start of prep, you come in the most fed, in the highest body fat, with the most amount of strength and the most amount of energy, theoretically. And then at the end of the prep, and that's the lowest stress environment too, theoretically. And then at the end of the prep, you have the lowest body fat, the least amount of food, potentially the highest amount of output, and the highest amount of stress for sure. And what most people do is they start at the least stressful position and they add a little bit of stress, and then a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And they do that by decreasing food and increasing output simultaneously the whole way. Absolutely. And they get to the back end of the prep where it's the most stressful, and they keep increasing the stressful load. So that individual just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and harder and harder and harder. And it just becomes an absolute slog to get to the end. And I think that's why a lot of people get to like 6 week out condition and they don't make it over the hill. Like there's a ton of guys and girls that get on stage and you're like, oh, could have just made it. Like, I wonder what happened at the end. And it's because that's when most people break, because they've just been going bit by bit by bit, adding more. Whereas if we think about that scenario, it's like the least amount of stress is at the start. So why can we not apply the most amount of external stress? That external stress would be pull some calories decently, get body fat off as fast as possible, get most of the hard work done at the front, give yourself the opportunity to actually do less at the end. Because all prep is a management of two things: input, output. How much energy have you got in that difference point? Like, we need to be in an energy deficit to facilitate fat loss. That's a given. But how do we manage that deficit? Do we have more food taken out? Do we add more exercise? Do we do a combination of the both of them? And then as we start, theoretically, you want to lessen the severity of the deficit as you get closer to contest prep, because you don't want to be losing as much weight at the end, because it comes with a higher risk for muscle loss. We shouldn't be extending and exacerbating the deficit at the end like most people do. We should be starting to decrease it, because that's the most stressful time.
And I think psychologically it helps the client as well, because you end up, sort of starting to look more and more conditioned earlier out. And I think which takes a lot of stress off the client of, am I going to be ready or am I not going to be ready? So I think on that psychological side of it as well, it's a huge advantage for the client.
Yeah, it gives you the opportunity to put a bit of food, but like, what's more motivating to an individual who's starving, who's, let's just again pick an arbitrary number, who's eating 1,800 calories at 10 weeks out, and you're like, you know what? We've lost 10 kilos. We only have to lose 4 more now. Like in the first 10 weeks, we lost 10. In the next 10 weeks, we have to lose 5, half of the amount. Theoretically, that means that if your deficit was X, you can now half that deficit and they'll still lose enough. And you say that individual, guess what? I'm going to give you back 250 calories this week. And they're like, fuck yeah, I can do that. And then the cool thing is like what we know is that when you give people more food, what do we typically see? Output goes up, fidgety goes up, general like mood goes up. So they actually then start to burn a bit more. So like the 250 you gave them back with a 250 calorie left over now still becomes like a 300, 400 calorie deficit because the person is just more fucking mobile and they're excited about it, And then you get closer again, you're like, a little bit more food. The difference is this requires like a lot of skill to the eye of the coach to go, I'm confident that I can put food back in here because I know that my numbers are all right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people, like you said, that last few weeks before, and it's like people just start pulling more. And then on the side, they've got clients that are just eating more off the diet because they're just so stressed and fucked up. Or we've got people that are just both centrally and peripherally so fatigued that they're just water balloons and you can't see the fat loss that's occurring. Yeah. Or their like performance just shits the bed and then they lose tissue. Like all of the negative stuff that could happen starts to happen. But if you can pull back on that stress, pump the brakes a little bit instead of just driving the fucking accelerator through the floor like most people do, then you actually start to see the results that you work so hard for start to come to fruition. So that's the whole schema of like how I think about prep anyway.
Yeah. It's interesting how you say that as well, because I'll come back to this bikini girl where she did her last show in season B last year, and they told her she had to be a little bit leaner. Muscularity, everything else was perfect. So we said, look, the next show's in 22 weeks. We can get you a little bit leaner, get food back up. And I think, it's probably okay to do the show after. So I got her a little bit leaner at the start, and then feedback had come back that they're like, no, she's too lean now. So, okay, cool. So I actually spent probably 14 of the 20 weeks just pushing food up and up and up and up the entire time to the point where, I think her last prep, she got pushed into the ground with sort of aerobic weight training, like circuits and stuff like that. It was down to 1,300 calories and, hours on the stepper, to just pulling her back and probably strength training. And we started on like 1,700 and we ended up at like 2,500 for the majority of the prep. And we were just sort of filling her out the entire time. So it was a much better experience. It was much less stress. And I think it worked out quite well. She brought a much, much, much better, fuller physique in. Yeah,
the point is though, is you have to get lean enough to do that, right?
Yeah.
Actually, a really good example for people to go and look at right now is John Dewett. He's an American fella, 212 competitor. Yeah. He's just about to finish up his prep. I think he's like 2 or 3 weeks out. But at about 6 weeks out, like he was looking pretty good, but he wasn't quite there yet. And then he but he was on very low calories, like he pushed hard. So then he slightly escalated calories just a little bit to pull back from the stress, got a bit leaner. And for the last 3 to 4 weeks, he's just been slowly tapping that fuel back in, progressively still getting leaner because unlike what for some reason people think more calories equals no fat loss, it just means less fat loss, right? It doesn't mean that it's just eradicated overnight. Like if you put 100 calories back in, you're for sure still losing weight. And he's just been slowly working his way back up so that he's basically decreasing the stress from the input and he's still got the output. So that's still an external stress, but he's shortening the distance between the deficit or the input and the output so that the stress isn't so high. And he's starting to progressively look better, better, and better. But he's got it all there. It's sort of like a diary of like for people to go and look at it. They're trying to get an application, like a visual representation of what we're talking about here.
Nice. That's pretty cool.
I'll add to this too, just as Richie brought this up just then, and it made me think about other things that people really, I think, lack the foresight with prep and how to get peeled is that understand like what your tools are for. Like food is both a tool to get lean because we need to remove it in order to create the deficit, but it's also a tool to drive performance. And then we require performance on the other side to maintain muscle mass. So if your diet strategy is only ever set up to lose weight and not to control or support performance, there'll be a point in time where performance goes backwards. And when performance goes backwards severely, so will your physique from a visual point of view. So like people need to just think about like what the tool's there for. Like, why would I do this? Like, why is maybe a high day better than no high days, or psychologically or physically? There's some arguments for both. Or like, why would we want to take a diet break? Do we see physiological changes currently in the research? Nah, not really. But have I seen it work fantastically well for people in prep for the last 6 years? Absolutely, I have. So I'm going to continue to do it because my empirical evidence kind of now outweighs that evidence. Plus, also that evidence isn't in bodybuilders really. So, but yeah, I think if people could just think about the why more and think about what they have to keep high in that performance is one of those, and what they need to use to drive that and facilitate that outcome, then they'll probably be a lot smarter with their diet strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And we were going to touch a little bit on PEDs, Dean, but what I reckon is you want to be on the same peg as Rich in terms of episode numbers. So I reckon I'm going to have to get you back on to discuss that as a solo episode, buddy. So would you be down for that? Just talking about PEDs for bodybuilders in general? And
yeah, man. Yeah, anytime.
That's the guy.
Maybe we can go tag team it up with Joe. Would be pretty sick little podcast.
Yeah, cool. We can sort that. Yeah, because I'm talking to Joe. Joe will be episode 1 of the series. I'm seeing him tonight. So yeah, the audience will know him and we'll do it roundtable. But actually, I meant to say this at the start. I'm pretty sure you guys are the first educational roundtable that I've done. I had one for the finale of the season 1, but that was just me and my friends talking shit about the year and COVID and everything. But this is the first actual educational roundtable of the O Show. So congrats, boys. We made it. And no doubt there will be more in future.
I appreciate it.
It's and we'll definitely have to get these numbers evened up where we'll get you or Rich on every month. Just keep chasing each other on who's got the most appearances.
I've got to build my profile so I can get you more views. Yeah. Or listens, whichever one it is.
No, it's awesome, guys. I think this is going to be a great little episode, and I think it's going to be. I think we're going to have to call it like how to get peeled like a potato, right? Reference to the start. I think that was the perfect title because
technically, although it's great for us, I don't think people will understand it. If anything, it's like how to look like a walnut, you know?
Yeah. Now, I like that episode you done as well with Joe. That was a good one as well. So, well, we'll definitely get more of these roundtables. These lined up over the next sort of maybe 8 weeks or so, and we'll get you guys on to talk. I know you guys agree about a lot of stuff, but I think when you are talking together, it sparks good conversation, and that's why I just sit back and let you guys chat because it gets really good conversation going about different theories and what you actually agree on and how it supports the knowledge. So awesome stuff. And Dean, are you going to be coming over this way to Rich's place to do the contest prep, or what's the deal with that?
We don't know what's going on with this. Every week the COVID rules change, so we got to make sure we can. We can make sure because Queensland, we're not allowed. I think Queensland's barred WA at the moment. So
yeah,
we've barred you now, hey?
Yeah,
payback's a bitch.
Yeah, I think as well, it'll be really cool is like even on this same topic about getting lean is like going into the training side of things as well. I think it'll be a whole other because today we just sort of delved into a little bit with like setups of contests and a little bit with input, but there's so much of output that you can go through as well that can play a factor into getting conditioned as well, whereas it's not just as simple as sometimes it's just do everything that you do the same. Like there are ways you can structure it for better adherence and things like that. So there's a whole other side of this as well that we can go through at some point as well.
100%. That'll be awesome. Guys, if you've heard it here, we've got a couple ideas for podcasts. If you guys want it, screenshot it now and tag about telling us what topic it is. Is it PEDs? Is it going to be training, Ryan getting peeled? Is it going to be just coming on and talking shit? Like, what are we gonna get these guys on to talk about next? Because I think these have been good episodes, guys. And yeah, I really thank you for your time. I know you guys are busy. So if anyone doesn't follow either Rich or Dean, just shout out your Instagram names. Rich, why don't you go first?
Richard_physique code and at Richard_physique code and at physique code.
Nice. And Dean?
Yeah, mine's just our business is flex_success. For anyone that's looking at home, there you can spell it. And mine is just my name, I believe, Dean McKillop. I don't think there's anything special on either end of it.
Perfect. And if you want to go find, I'm pretty sure I follow all 4 of those pages, guys. If you want to just go in and search them to make sure you get the right ones.
Well, you have to now. You got to go searching for that potato, mate.
Yeah, that's it. I'm going to go find that. I'm going to buy the book after my next interview here. Awesome, guys. Thank you for your time, and I will see you guys on the next roundtable or the next solo episode you guys do. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, mate.
Thanks for joining me on today's episode of The O Show. If you know somebody who needs to hear this episode today, please share this with them via message or on social media. Don't forget to also take a screenshot and share it on your story and tag me at Oren McCorry so we can continue to grow the podcast and help more people change their lives with the advice given here. Also, keep the 5-star reviews coming over on iTunes, as that helps people who normally wouldn't listen to the show find it and get the O Show in their ears and drive the podcast forward to help more people around the world with the advice here. Have a great day, and I will speak to you soon.